The next one is a graph. So, we are graphing what's called an exponential function. An exponential function just means that the exponent is your variable. That's where you're going to substitute in. You're going to substitute in the exponent. So, when I make my table, we are going to use the same normal number used when you did the squared ones and the cubed ones. We did -2, -1, 0, 1, and 2. Then we're going to plug it in and find our answers. So we have to first of all do 3/4 to the -2 power.
-2. Where am I going to do that? Am I going to do caret?
Caret, yep, caret -2, exactly.
2. (16/9)
Exactly. Okay, then we're going to do the 3/4 to the -1 power.
Okay. Over 4/3.
4/3, yep. And we're going to do our 3/4 to the 0 power. Then we're going to take our 3/4 to the 1st power.
Three-fourths.
3/4 and 3/4 to the 2nd power.
(9/16).
9/16. Keep in mind the negative exponent, what that does. The negative exponent does the reciprocal. So here you had 16/9.
Oh, yeah.
Down here we have 9/16. And here anything to the 0 power is always equal to 1. So we would have to let the computer plot those points because we have all those crazy fractions. We're just going to estimate about where they're at. So 16/9 would almost be to 2 because 18/9 would be 2. So at -2, we're not quite up to 2. We're just going to estimate it and guess, just put it close enough. -1 is 4/3. 4/3 is 1 1/3, so it's just a little bit above the 1. 0's right at the 1. 1 is at 3/4, which would be a little bit below the 1. And 2 is at 16/9, which is just a little bit lower than that. I could get all my dots in there. Now, it also tells you you have to put the asymptote on there. An asymptote is an imaginary line that the graph is going to approach but not cross. So you'll have a symbol that looks like this. It's your asymptote. The asymptote is going to be right here on the x-axis. So what's going to happen when you hit the graph button is, although you can't see it very well on here, it's going to come up from up here, it's going to curve down, and it's going to level off right towards that line, that dotted line we put on there. That dotted line tells the graph that, oh, it's not going to cross this point, so it has to shoot off the other way. And so my graph will look like that. So we'll do our 5 points. We'll put our asymptote right on the x-axis, because this one doesn't have any plus or minuses, so it's not going to move. And then when you hit graph, it's going to draw your graph. Look, something like that. All right. Number 14. We're going to make our table. We're going to use -2, -1, 0, 1, and 2. Now, notice we have a negative x up there. So we're going to take our 1/2 to the minus a negative 2 power. When I do minus a negative 2, what does it become?
Positive.
A positive 2. So that's going to be 1/2 to the second power.
Okay. One-fourth.
Is 1/4. Same thing on here. We're going to have 1/2 to the minus a negative 1. And since we have minus a negative, it's going to make it 1/2 to the first power.
One. Oh. Two.
No,
Nope.
it's minus a negative 1. Right?
Minus.
Because we have the minus in front, so we have minus a negative 1.
Half?
Is 1/2, yep. Because minus a negative becomes a positive, and 1/2 to the first power stays 1/2. Now we're going to have 1/2 to the minus 0 power.
Minus 0. 1.
Is 1. Yep, anything to the 0 power is 1, whether it's a positive or a negative 0, because there's really not such a thing as a negative 0 power, but it should be equal to 1. So now we're going to have 1/2 to the minus 1 power.
So that's going to be.
It's going to be
2.
2, exactly. And 1/2 to the minus 2 power,
4.
going to be 4. All right. So again, with the fractions, for sure you want to use the plot point tool. You can do it for all of them. We're just going to estimate. Negative 2 is only up to 1/4, so it's not very high. Negative 1 went up to 1/2. 0 went up to 1. 1 went up to 2. And 2 went up to 4. Then we have to put our asymptote. Where's our asymptote going to be?
On the line.
On the x-axis.
The x-axis.
So right there, you're going to just click on this symbol here and click right on the x-axis. It'll put that dotted line for you. Now when you hit graph, this graph is starting here, curving down and shooting off in this direction and leveling out. It'll look something like that. Okay, so number 18, that'd be the last one on here. Whoops, that's not the last one. I'm trying to skip problems. I better do this one here. Negative 2 to the x power. So, what number should we put in for x?
Negative 2. Negative 1, 0, 2, 1.
1 and 2.
1, 2.
So, we're going to do our negative 2 to the negative 2 power. No parentheses around the negative 2, so you're not going to want parentheses on that on your calculator. Negative 2 to the negative 2 power.
I got a decimal point. That's not
Change it
right?
to a fraction. He probably gave you a decimal. Shift in the fraction.
Shift, oh, 1/4, negative 1/4.
Negative 1/4, yep. And we're going to have negative 2 to the negative 1 power.
Half.
Negative
Negative.
1/2.
Negative half.
Negative 2 to the 0 power.
Zero. 2. Negative 2. Negative 2? What?
Negative 2 to the 0 power. What do you get?
To the 0 power equals, oh, 1.
Negative.
1.
Better have that negative sign on there. Negative 1. Right?
Oh, mine came out positive.
Did you use parentheses?
Uh-uh.
It came out positive. Oh, that didn't look like a negative 2 to me. That looks like a plus 2 to me.
What is that? I couldn't memorize my,
Try it again.
negative 2.
You need your glasses. To the 0 power.
To the 0. Well, that still looks like a plus. Where's my negative? Oh, negative 2. To the 0 power. Oh, yeah, negative.
Okay, there we go. Because that negative's not going to change. All right. So now we're going to do negative 2 to the first power.
Negative half.
Whoops. Negative 2 to the first power.
Oh, to the first. Oh,
Yeah, we already did to the
-2
negative 1 earlier. Now we need to do to the first.
times first power. Now I've got a negative 2 to the first power equals negative 2.
There we go. Anything to the first power should stay the same. And then negative 2 to the second power.
Negative 4.
Negative 4. So that these are reciprocals of each other, which they are. Okay, so negative 2 is at negative 1/4. So we got to go down a little bit. Negative 1 is down negative 1/2, so a little bit farther. 0 is down to negative 1. 1 is down to negative 2. And 2 is down to negative 4. Then we got to put our asymptote on there. Where's our asymptote going to be?
It's the across the axis.
On the x-axis.
X-axis.
So this graph, when you draw it, when you just hit graph, it's going to come from the bottom, shoot up, and level out as it gets up to the x-axis. Something like that. All right.